prohibition in place, and so we are doing our best to try and support the industry in places we can buy South African wine, and Dubai would be one of those. So I think today is two reasons for coming together. One is to drink some great wine in the company of some wonderful people from the South African wine industry, but also to spread the gospel about an industry that makes, to my mind, the best wine in the world if you combine quality with value, and wine that is a huge driver of the South African economy. So hopefully you don't just enjoy the wine today and enjoy the stories from four incredible people in our wine community, but you also continue to support, drink and enjoy South African wine. And a big thank you in advance for that. And thank you to Kathy and the council for this opportunity. So the four people we have got today, we start on a particularly low note with the man who was Jan van Riebeck's wine cellar master when he arrived in the Cape in the 1600s, and he's still going strong a few centuries later. He's become a very good friend of mine. He's a great philanthropist, he's a great winemaker, he's a great raconteur, and he's the king of Chenin Blanc in South Africa, and we'll be kicking off with him in just a moment with our first wine. But it's a very good evening, Ken Forrester, and lovely to have you with us.
Thank you, Dan. It's very, very kind of you. Much kinder than usual, I must say. I expected a little roasting from you. You're off your best game tonight.
The evening is still young, Mr. Forrester, unlike yourself. So that's our first winemaker, and we'll be chatting to Ken in a second. We then have Niël Groenewald. You might be looking at Niël thinking, I seem to remember him playing for the Springboks in the late 90s. He does have the build of a marauding eighth man, but he's got a very delicate touch for a big unit, a touch that converts to wine that flies the South African flag enormously proudly right around the world. I'm not sure there is a South African wine brand that has quite the global impact of Nederburg, and Nederburg has got just some beautiful wine at the moment. And in carrying on the Chenin Blanc story that will start with Ken Forrester, and Niël Groenewald from Nederburg will pick it up with the Anchorman, which I think is a delightful wine. So Niël, a very good evening, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. And it wasn't eighth man, it's actually scrum off, so in today's terms.
I sometimes forget just how large Afrikaans people actually are. Niël is 6'7", so that is scrum half territory where he comes from. So two down. We then have somebody who's been incredibly generous with her time because she's currently on maternity leave, but has sidestepped looking after a little one to come and join us. Not just an incredibly gifted winemaker, but a very passionate wine person from an estate that is one of the pioneers of food and wine pairing in South Africa. I think the chef, Gregory, thinks you go for the food, but we actually all go there for the wine, and the food is a bonus. Waterkloof is the estate, but also making the false base Syrah, the old school we're trying today. Hello, Nadia.
Hello, Dan. It's nice to be able to move away from changing nappies a bit. So, and I'm very excited that you mentioned that people do actually rather go there for the wine and the food. It's good.
Well, I hope that message gets back to Gregory as quickly as possible. So three down, and then finally the king of social media in South African wine. Up until a few years ago, he and his family were the empire behind Warwick, but he's also had for many years a label called Villa Fonte, which is making, quite simply, some of the best red wine in the world. And don't take mine or his word for it, it's been winning awards everywhere for some time now. He's also the chairman of Stellenbosch Wine Routes, the chairman of Stellenbosch Tourism, the chairman of Stellenbosch in general, and somebody who is such a force for good in South African wine. He brings us his seriously old dirt from Villa Fonte today. Our fourth guest is Mike Bradcliff. Good evening, Michael.
Hi, Dan, and hi, everyone. Great to be here. It's a beautiful day in Stellenbosch.
And it is to Stellenbosch we will return with Michael, wrap up everything for us and give us some closing thoughts. We start, though, with the man who really put Chenin Blanc on the map in South Africa. And I'll invite you, if you do have the wines, I know there were two different packages. If you have the package that includes the Petit Chenin from Ken Forrester, or if, like Kathy, you've just bought all four of them in several numbers, do pour yourself a glass of it. If you've got the other Chenin, please pour a glass of that just as a starting point, because there are a lot of notes of comparison that are worth making. But Ken, if we kick off, before we taste the actual wine with you, by all means have a sip of it wherever you are now. But this Chenin Blanc story in South Africa, if we look at the transition you really gave Chenin Blanc a massive shove in the right direction. When you planted it, you were told very firmly, don't do this. It's not going to work. It's a very silly idea, which I suspect was the biggest push for you to actually do it. But what you've done with Chenin Blanc is taken a grape that most people knew as Steern, as something that was generally fairly cheap and nasty and gave you a 4-day hangover, or was translated into brandy, and you've now made it a wine that either as its own varietal or as the backbone of blends is leading the South African wine charge around the world.
Dan, it's been a miraculous time for Chenin Blanc. And if I go back and I think of 25 years ago when we started, you're right. The neighbors weren't exactly wholehearted supporters of the notion of Chenin Blanc, let alone barrel fermented Chenin Blanc. And one of my neighbors very kindly said to me, seeing as you come from Johannesburg, did you buy a return ticket? Because of what we were doing with Chenin Blanc. The lucky part is, we haven't used the back half of that return yet. We're still here. And, you know, Chenin Blanc, there were a couple of guys who were doing a little bit of Chenin Blanc. Hilco Higgelbisch at Boschendal, Jean de Niël at Morgenhof. They were doing kind of trying to find a way with Chenin Blanc. And I thought, you know, this is great. There's a real opportunity to show this wine off for what people don't know about it. And kind of, it's been called the Cinderella grape. People say that it's very, you know, effusive. You never kind of taste it. You don't know what it tastes like. So when you finally get to great Chenin Blanc, and Chenin Blanc, which is a real good drinking wine, if you love Sauvignon Blanc or Pinot Gris or Pinot Grigio, or even a lightly wooded Chardonnay, and you have a Chenin Blanc, it kind of covers all of those bases. Chenin Blanc's a very happy, fill all those gaps kind of wine. And something like our Petit Chenin is really designed to be your everyday drinking wine. This, for me, is my 100-point wine. When you've had that tough day at work and you come home and you reach into the refrigerator and you pour yourself a glass, cheers, of Chenin, you have a sip and you go, oh, nice. That's 100 points, because what could be better? How would you want it to be better? And honestly, you need a wine that you can rely on. You need a wine that every day just quietly delivers. You know, almost like Stavros does for you at home, Dan, you know, brings your newspaper to you. And so Chenin Blanc has this ability to fit right across that range, and it produces wine which is brilliantly bright in color, lovely, gets a hint of gold on it with a bit of age. It goes great with food. I mean, it loves shellfish and seafood. And frankly, a couple of friends coming around, Chenin loves that too. Just crack a bottle. I mean, somebody once said to me, you know, this Petit Chenin of yours, how long does it last? I said, well, with the top off, about half an hour, no more than that, surely. And I think that's pretty important. We need to, you know, wine, as wonderful as it is, and we can talk on about wine and about the nuances and the wonderful soil and the terroir and the pH and the whatever and all these things. It's not going to solve the Middle East crisis or any other crisis for that matter. It is a beverage first and foremost, and we should remember that. I think we do ourselves well to enjoy wine for what it is, for the labor that goes into it. And when I looked this morning, when we got up this morning, 6 o'clock, it was freezing cold. It was bitterly cold. I believe the temperature here was around 4 degrees this morning, but it was icy. There's a wind off the ocean. I went out to the guys who had come to start their day. It had rained last night, and we were going to look at pruning, and we weren't quite sure whether we were going to get into the vineyards with it. And I looked at these guys in their coats and their jackets and their masks and their secateurs and all out into the vineyard. I went out with them for about an hour. Man, it's brutal. It's hard work. And when you look at that work that, as Mike said earlier, the value chain that goes all the way back to pruning a vineyard, that finally one day comes into a glass that you can sit at home and enjoy. I just love that whole train, that whole chain of events that takes place. And to those folks who are out there pruning in the midwinter chill this morning, to all of you, cheers. You do a great job.
Cheers, kid.
cheers also to our friends in Dubai, Ken, who are celebrating wine with us. And it's never been more important for us to have people around the world drinking South African wine. Give us a snapshot, without trying to get too gloomy, and as much as that is possible, of just how much of a hit our wine industry has taken, and what we can hopefully do to come back from this.
Dan, it's quite frankly appalling. The fact that we were put into a prohibition. I mean, one must know from history, during the prohibition in the United States, all it did was drive alcohol underground and create a very, very fertile place for the mafia to take root in America. And you create a prohibitive state, you ban alcohol, it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to still be available. I mean, I'm seriously thinking that if I have to register another company, it's going to be called Bootleggers Incorporated. I mean, what are we going to do? We have to survive, and we've got people to support. Our restaurants are completely decimated. I had today 2 letters from restaurants whom we supply saying that they were terribly, terribly sorry to have to inform us that they were going into liquidation. And, you know, that was just today. And the longer this ban goes on, the more damage it'll do. And there's a wonderfully, wonderfully simple solution. Our president, Mr. Ramaphosa, tells us that he is going to create jobs in this country, and he has plans to create 500,000 jobs. But I'll tell you what, unban alcohol and you'll save 1 million jobs. It's that simple.
Trying times for the industry. We get through them, amongst other ways, by having a few glasses of wine where and when we can get hold of them. Most people have got in Dubai with us a glass of one of the 2 Chenins. If it is the Petit Chenin, take us through very briefly, Ken, this wine itself, what makes it so magical for you, what we're picking up, nose, what's on the palate, what sets this apart?
Petit was the brainchild of probably the finest wine taste I've ever come across. A man called Steve Daniel was the buyer for Oddmans in the UK. And anybody in the wine trade in the UK today would know at least 50% of the people that they worked with had come through Oddmans. It was like the online university, the on for wine. And that was Oddmans. It had all these geeky people on the floor who were writing their own tasting notes. Most of them had a doctorate in philosophy or maybe music or perhaps one of the other sciences. And they weren't working in their field, but they were working in their passion. And they were running these stores, about 400 stores in the high street. And Steve Daniels said to me, "We love your wooded Chenin Blanc, but could you give us a Chenin Blanc from South Africa where we can get this beautiful bright color? I want to taste the sunshine. I want it to be crisp and fresh and not completely dry necessarily. If there's a smattering of sugar on that, then it perhaps 3 grams or something. Can you do that?" And I said, "Steve, that may be possible." And he said, "It'd be about half the price of what you're doing." I said, "Well, that's going to be tricky." And he said, "But if we order 5,000 cases," I said, "Sure, I think you'll have that ready by tomorrow. We'll do that. That's no trouble at all." And sure enough, we went about looking at how we were going to make this sunshine-driven wine that was fresh and crisp and dry and bright and light, and all of these things put together. And I have to say that was 1996 when we made our first Petit Chenin and went into Oddmans. And it was our little wine. It was the wine that you can drink every day. It's completely unoaked. It's fermented in stainless steel. It's a really nice, quick fermentation. We want to make sure that we have a nice, even, quick fermentation. Temperature control on the tank to keep it cool, so we get nice fruit flavors coming out of the wine. And we leave it on the lees for about 4 or 5 months, and then we filter that and bottle this delicious elixir. And on the taste, we're going to taste some melons, perhaps even some white fruit, some apples and pears. And there's a ripeness that, for a moment, reminds you perhaps of pineapple. You've got that moment of kind of tropical fruit ripeness, and then it ends fresh and crisp and clean. And it leaves a little salt on the edge of your palate, which almost makes you want to have another sip. It almost has you salivating for that next sip. And to that say, here's to the next sip. And to all of you in Dubai, I've had so many happy times, some great times in Dubai. I know that there was a small little skirmish one night. We were in a club and we had gin out of a teapot. and it was the wrong brand for the company we were working with. But apart from that, we've always had a fantastic time in Dubai.
We want you to come back, Ken.
I'm coming in November. Let me get there. Just trying to get there.
Okay.
Ken, the perfect way to kick off our tasting. Hopefully you will stay with us and we'll get a final word from you at the end of the tasting, but a lovely way to start. And I think it's not just a terrific wine, but a fabulous value proposition. This is a really nice way to kick off, and with Chenin, which is doing such great things for South Africa. So Ken Forrester, thank you. We'll try and check in with you right at the end if you are still with us. Let's move though from one Chenin to another and to our scrum half. Before we try your wine, Niël, your thoughts on Ken Forrester? The man himself is always reluctant to tell his own personal story. He's a great winemaker, great influence. How much of a wine legend is Mr. Forrester in the South African wine sphere?
I think Ken and Chenin Blanc is definitely synonymous. So I mean, it's amazing the link, and also the true ambassador that he is for Chenin Blanc. Chenin obviously being very important for us as a country. 18% of our plantings being Chenin, and Ken has really always raised the flag and has gone the extra mile. So no, he's a true legend when it comes to Chenin. I haven't tasted any of his other wines, but I'd rather drink his Chenin. So I think that's the one that really works. But just on Chenin, and to add, Ken has told you quite a bit on Chenin, but just to add maybe, I think Chenin Blanc, if you were to make an exceptional wine and you think of where the industry was a couple of years ago, I mean, around the 2000, everybody opening up and you can start selling wine. You know, there was a bit of a baby boom, honeymoon phase, and the growers weren't necessarily thinking of where to plant what. It was more about what the market wanted. So if they wanted red wine, they planted red wine. That didn't matter if it was on the right terroir or not. With Chenin, I think we've got this unique thing where if you just look at the numbers, the chances of Chenin being 80% at those stages, 25% of the industry, that it was planted in the right area and on the right soil type with the right microclimate, you can actually start expressing terroir. And that to me is the nicest challenge of Chenin Blanc. There's such a wide variety of Chenin planted. Don't get me wrong, I'm not going to say that all old vines are good. I think if an old wine is good, then it's really good and it's proven itself, but you get some terrible old vines that actually should just rather be ripped out and plant something else. But Chenin as a variety, I've always loved working with it. I've made millions and millions of liters, and I've made very small parcels. And it's, I think, one of the most honest grape varieties you get. It shows you exactly what the growing conditions are like. So if there's a lot of water in the soil, specifically now dryland Chenin that I work with, then you'll have bigger bunches, more swollen bunches, maybe some diluted fruit. But if it's a sunny vintage, a hot vintage, then you're going to get more of the raisiny type of flavors. If it's a cool vintage, you're going to have racy acidity. So it's like taking a photo of the vintage by making your Chenin in a specific style. For us with the Anchorman, it's called Anchorman because of the founder of Nederburg, which was around 1791 when the farm was founded. And what's quite amazing about the farm is that they've always worked with wine. There's quite a few farms in the Western Cape that would do wine, and then they would go to citrus, and then they would do apples. But the Nederburg farm has always been into wine. And yeah, the Anchorman, even though the marketing gurus would tell you it's about, you know, founding Nederburg and the house and the all cornerstone, for me it's got an extra level, and that's where it's actually the anchor of the industry. I once had a chairperson at a cooperative that said that Chenin Blanc and Cinzo were the two varieties that's carried growers through thick and thin, and it's really true. And I think with Chenin Blanc being the anchor of the industry, it's just our tribute to making exceptional Chenin. And it's so diverse, so you can make so many different styles. But at the end of the day, you should never overpower it. It's, like I said, a very honest grape, very similar to Pinot Noir, where it can be a bit finicky, and it's about getting the fruit to shine. So with going back to the specific vintage or the wine that we've got, the Anchorman, what we do here is it's really a bit of a playpen for Chenin Blanc. So that's what the label looks like. So our winemakers get to experiment with different sites. I am a firm believer of the concept of cool sunshine. Now, cool sunshine might sound like a bit of a opsy, but it's either proximity to ocean, where you get these cool sea breezes like the air conditioner for Chenin Blanc, where it's got the slow ripening, or you have altitude. So by having either the cool sunshine, proximity, or altitude, you just get Chenin that ripens slower. You get more intense flavors, but still preserving that good acidity. It's a term that I many years ago actually learned from Ken. So and to me, it's really carried me through a lot of years in the wine industry trying to explain this, and it just makes sense. As soon as you see a map and you put a temperature map on the it drives where I source grapes overall through all the grapes, but yeah, specifically then with Chenin. So also the experimentation that gets done here, we play around with amphora, so to really not have an oak influence, but rather a fruit influence, with a bit of minerality and just building layers. There would be a portion that goes into older barrels. There would be a stainless steel portion. And very interesting, we've got a portion that actually does a whole bunch fermentation. So, and like a carbonic maceration. And it's a very spicy component that also just adds another level of flavor. So when you start drinking the Anchorman, it's like having a real stormy ocean in your mouth. It's just waves imploding the whole time, and it just carries on forever. So it's really taking Chenin to the next level of what can be done.
I'm seeing
I hope I wasn't on mute.
No, just Ken. I think I'm seeing a good few smiles there from people trying out the wine. The wine in itself is fabulous, and you've spoken it to what it is. I'd like to build on something Ken spoke about in terms of what you drink this with and the occasion. There are very strict rules that I think most people have started to throw by the wayside of a white wine is chicken and fish and a red wine is a big piece of steak, and that's how the world works. But Chenin for me goes beyond just breaking those rules. It establishes its whole own space entirely, in that I can think this year I've had cracking Chenin Blanc with steak. I've had Chenin with a coconut chicken curry. There's so much you can do with Chenin Blanc. It's got just such a breadth to its pairing ability.
Yeah, I must say, I always tell it in our winemaker dinners, and it's been tried in quite a few top-end restaurants in Europe and in South Africa. One evening, I've got quite a bit of a sweet tooth, so I think that's how I get the 6'7" body. But one night, after quite a few bottles of Chenin, actually went into the kitchen and wanted some dessert. And what materialized was actually quite something funny. It was like 3 scoops of vanilla ice cream, like a nice creamy ice cream. And also some olive oil, so grassy olive oil, and some Malden sea salt. So just sprinkling that over, and that together with the wooded Chenin is just like magic. It really works, and it brings out all the elements. So yeah, definitely something to try at home, to get a few frowns around the dinner table, but I can promise you it's magic.
The secret is out. How does Heston Blumenthal come up with those recipes? He drinks 3 bottles of Anchorman Chenin Blanc, and away he goes. One last question for you, Niël. We'll also come back to you at the end if you are still with us. But just for now, the challenge for South African wine is one of survival, really, at the moment. Part of that survival is promoting our brand South Africa around the world. How much of a weight on the shoulders of Nederburg is that, given that you're probably our most widespread wine brand around the world?
Yeah, no, the weight it's not something that can be done single-handedly. I think the situation that we're in, and to me, what's really worrying besides COVID and not being able to sell, is also just the amount of wine that we've got in the industry, over and above the normal stock holding. So add to that we won't be able to sell for a couple of weeks. It still gives you a lot of wine and carryover stock. And personally, I don't know where we're going to find space for the new crop. It's really worrying. The tanks are full, but there is pressure. We're trying our best, but it's, like I said, not a single approach. But we need to do it in a constructive manner. We need to do it in a responsible manner. Otherwise, all the build that we've had over the last couple of years with producers getting better and better grapes prices is just going to plummet. And that's what we can't really have at this stage, because it's supply and demand. If you've got 300 liters of excess in the industry, then the prices should drop. So it's about making constructive plans on what to do so that it doesn't happen, because we've gone quite far with increasing awareness, increasing the price, doing the right thing when nobody's looking. So it's now about continuing that, but it's going to be tough. I promise you. I mean, I sit in Solba and I sit in Vinpro and on Woza with those boards, and that's top of mind for all those organizations currently, is how do you manage the stock levels besides the government that's not making it easy.
It is a monumental challenge. If there is one glimmer of sunshine for me, it is something that's illustrated by this evening, that our wine community is so closely knit, and it's a very supportive industry, and it's not a case of my next door neighbor is my competitor or my enemy. There's a great sense of kinship through the industry, which I really, really like, and I think it's going to stand us well as we try and rebuild. Hopefully have a last word with you at the end of our session, but if I can jump over to Nadia, who's asked us to do a 7-hour session, because that'll keep her away from nappies and feeding for a good chunk of time. Nadia, lovely to have you with us. Before we talk a little about your wine, I love the opportunity to give wine people the chance to speak about other wines, other wine people, other wine brands. And for me, Nederburg sits in two spaces in the eyes of most people. It's a massive brand, it's hugely successful, but for some of the wine snobs, it's too big a brand, I'm not going to drink Nederburg. Whereas those of us who know, and Nadia, you'll definitely be one of them, if we look at not just this Anchorman we're drinking now, everything from the 2 Centuries Cab to some of their Ingenuity blends. Yes, there's some wine that's very widespread and we see a lot around the world, but it's also a brand and an estate that's given us exceptional wine for a very long time.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. Yeah, it's always been, and as you said, such a big pioneer brand in the industry, and they've done so much for brand South Africa, and for us to be associated with Nederburg as a South African producer has always been to our benefit. And I'm proud to sit at a table in wherever in the world and have someone open a bottle of Anchorman or whichever brand from the range. And fully feel that it's a fantastic representation of what South Africa can do.
And it's a representation that you yourself are a big part of, because your wines have got a huge fan base. We've got the false bay here. We'll introduce that in a moment. You can talk us through the difference in brand. But Waterkloof itself, huge accolades for the restaurant, and rightly so. There's some wizardry that goes on in that kitchen, but also some great wine. I was talking to my friend Steve earlier today about the Circle of Life, which is just one of the not just the best value but best white blends we have. The wine career that you've had there, the wine that you make there, it seems to be a combination of somebody who's very good at what she does having an enormous amount of fun with what she's doing.
Yeah, no, the thing is with Waterkloof is that it's myself in the winery, and then it's Paul Boutineau, the owner. So we think very similarly about wine, and we're both very passionate about wine. So we're always creating new projects. We're always experimenting. We're stomping grapes by feet. We're spraying fish extracts in the vineyard. We're playing around with doing whole bunch Cabernet Franc, whole bunch Petit Verdot. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, but we're always continuously experimenting. And we've actually now on the farm decided that we're just going to rip off the Band-Aid. So we've taken out all of our virus-infected blocks. We tried to isolate it, but it just didn't work. So now we're completely virus-free. And we've got less vineyards, but we've got some that's coming into proper production now too. So we're planting some more Grenache, which I'm quite excited about. We're following in the footsteps of Mr. Forrester. We're also in the Helderberg, so we're planting some more Chenin Blanc. So yeah, and that's the beauty of Waterkloof, is that we are a new brand technically compared to some of the older ones. But so we feel that we can keep on pushing the boundaries and keep on playing around and experimenting and just staying entertaining ourselves and not following a recipe. I think that's essential with winemaking, is to not fall into a sort of this pH is what I pick at, this sugar is what I pick at. Spend more time in your vineyards, taste your grapes, chew the skins, chew the stems if you want to, and just learn more. That's pretty much what it's about. And I feel with wine, every harvest, I feel that sort of butterflies in my stomach, even though I've done 12 harvests at Bradcliff. I'm nervous every single year because you never know what you're going to get, because we're so dependent on nature. And now we're influenced, like Niël said, with COVID, that we're going to be sitting probably with some volumes next year. So we're going to have to be juggling that again. So there's never a dull moment, in the South African wine industry or at Bradcliff. So if it's not a virus, a human virus, then it's a virus in the vineyard or whichever, but hopefully, we can survive this human virus and rise above it. And it's so fantastic to see the support that we're getting internationally. It's actually, sometimes it's almost saddening in a way how loyal our customers have been, and how they've taken to social media and posted on their Instagram stories and done videos promoting our brand. And that's just because of obviously fantastic wine, but also good relationships. And it warms my heart to see the support that Bradcliff has gotten, and also the support that Brand South Africa has gotten. It's we need to send everyone some Biltong after this is finished.
I see Mike Bradcliff, who's on to his second bottle of Seriously Old Dirt, asking if the virus in the vines was in fact corona. We have the option of sending in questions. If you'd like to and you're watching, just drop one into the chat and we'll put it to the relevant person or people. So Bradcliff is slightly different to False Bay, two different names. What is the relationship between the two, and how does this particular wine come about, Nadia?
So with Bradcliff, the brand, so you'll see on my screen, we've got the logo, the Blowing Man. That's our estate brand. So under that, you have the Bradcliff Sauvignon Blanc, you have the Circumstance range, and the Circle of Life range. And then we have another website, completely different company, where we do the False Bay range as well as the Peacock range. The False Bay range, we've got 6 wines. So we have the Sauvignon, Chenin, Chardonnay, Rosé, Syrah, as well as a Pinotage. And this is for me a fantastic range to do, because I can go out and find some interesting vineyards. So actually for the False Bay, I've got a block that I'm working with in the Wellington region, and then also a block in Stellenbosch. So quite a cool slope. The one in Stellenbosch actually overlooks the False Bay. And then the one in Wellington, you sort of build more structure on your wine. So with the False Bay range, it's, as I said, the grapes that we buy in, where the status are organic and are biodynamic wines that we produce. But for the False Bay, we also ferment it naturally. So we're not adding any yeast coming from wherever in the world. We stay true to the terroir. And that's the way that we feel that we're making more interesting wines. So with the False Bay too, we also don't overwork it. So the grapes are picked, it's fermented, nothing added to it. And then once a day, we'll do a délestage, which is just to run off the wine and then just pump it over once everything is run over. So we're not filling too much. We age it in our wooden fermenters to not have that sort of funky oak aromatics or any added powdery tannins on it. It's simply just a vessel that's giving that slow oxygen ingress to build on the structure of the wine, to have the tannins bind together and soften out. And then we leave it in our wooden fermenters for about a year or so. Take it out, basic filtration, and put it to bottle. So it's very much in line with the Bradcliff philosophy of keeping it pure and keeping it simple, and not manipulating the wines at all. We feel wine is such a special product, and it's influenced by nature. And a wine like the False Bay, which is your everyday drinking wine. But when you enjoy it, you must sort of have a reflection of the vintage on the wine as well. And yeah, if we embrace the vintage, so if it's a year with higher pHs, we'll make a wine with higher pHs. And we feel that's essential with making a natural product. So False Bay.
It's both a lovely wine and also terrific value, as those of you who bought it will have discovered. It's also a style I think we're seeing a lot more of. People are not just making more of it, but appreciating it more. Mike's territory, which we'll get to in a moment, continuously gives us incredible big, broad-shouldered Stellenbosch Shiraz. But the flip side of that grape's coin is the Syrah, which is often the cooler, lighter feel to it. And it's a wine that I think is starting to have more of an impact from a South African perspective.
No, definitely. People are enjoying, especially for a wine that's served by the glass in a restaurant, or you're going to have a barbecue or a braai. You want to have sort of that accessible, fresher style. So we generally pick fairly early. I personally like to pick early. I'd look for tannin ripeness, to not have any green tannins at all coming through. But this, you'll see we've got 13.5 alcohol on it. The acid is quite nice and fresh. The tannins, there's definitely grip to it, but it's not sticking too much to your palate, if that makes sense. And yeah, the freshness is key to just enjoy it as a drink on its own. But I generally enjoy red wine with food, and I like my pizza. So this is my pizza wine.
I can see them going together very, very well. And pizza far better than all that crazy stuff that your restaurant puts together. Nadia, lovely, lovely wines. We'll come back to you as well for one last thought before we wrap up. But I'm going to move over to the King of Stellenbosch as the fourth of our guests. And before we get into Stellenbosch and into your wine, Mr. Bradcliff, we've had Nadia present a bottle of wine from Waterkloof. It's one of the areas that I think South Africa has really, really built up over the last while, and that's the quality of our restaurants on wine estates and the bringing together of food and wine. You're the chairman of Stellenbosch Tourism, but just generally from a South African perspective, in a few months' time, Mike, when we can start traveling again, coming to South Africa to drink wine, eat food, and do the two together, probably going to be a pretty big part of our getting back on our feet process.
Yep, Dan, and hi to everyone. There's a lot of efforts going into Stellenbosch at the moment, both in terms of wine and food and tourism, accommodation, trying to get ready for the changes. But you know, as in many parts of the world, it's been pretty brutal. The whole lockdown, tourism's taken a pounding, wine's taken a pounding. But I can tell you that I've got very itchy feet at the moment. It's very unusual, and I look at yourself, Niël, Ken, Nadia. You know, we're all used to being on airplanes all the time, so I can't wait to get on the plane as well. But at least Western Cape tourism has opened up, and so perhaps it's the start of something.
Let's talk about the space you find yourself in, because it is an astonishing success story of both wine and marketing. And I don't pick up on the marketing to downplay the wine at all, because the wine is exceptional, but you've taken a great wine and you've added a great story, and the combination has been incredibly successful. For those people for whom Villafonte is not the most familiar space, talk us through how this Stellenbosch, Paarl, Western Cape, California collaboration came into being.
You know, something my mom taught me at a very early age is try to surround yourself with people that are smarter and more experienced than you are. So for me, that's always been relatively easy. But I was fortunate in the 90s to meet two Californians, a lady called Zelma Long and a guy called Phil Fries. And we became partners, and we've been partners ever since. We embarked on planting some vineyards in 95, 96, 97. And those vineyards were planted on a property which is our property, which has got a predominant soil type called Villafontes. And I guess the rest is history. We spent about 5 years trying to agonize over what the name of our wine was going to be. And eventually my wife at midnight, one night, just told us it's Villefontaine. Now finish your wine and go home, everybody. It's a very simple winery. We produce Bordeaux blends. That's what we do. We have only 3 wines. We're tasting one of them today, which I don't know if you guys can all see that, is called Seriously Old Dirt. I know some of you have got the wine in front of you, but Villefontaine is similar to many of the soils in South Africa. We have this remarkable attribute in South Africa that we have some of the oldest documented, if not the oldest documented soils in the world. And the Villefontaine soil type is one of, if not the oldest documented soil type in the world, in the cradle of humankind. And we figured that having American partners, whenever they were describing it to anybody in the trade, they would always say, hey man, that's some seriously old dirt. And so I guess the name stuck. This is our classic second label. It's a second wine. It's 100% our own fruit from our own vineyards. And it's tasting pretty yummy at the moment. I'm enjoying it.
I know yummy is the word you use quite often to describe this, and it is a perfect word. Also, it's quite interesting that you've got the seriously old dirt from those seriously old soils. I remember Ken Forrester telling me about what that dirt looked like when it was still a mountain before it all broke down to become what it is today. The idea of the second label, Greg Sherwood, the master of wine in London, said that this was South Africa's finest second label wine. People often think of it as well, it's a second label, it can't be as good, maybe it's not something I should be drinking. For me, that's certainly not the case. It's more your M and your C series is that special occasion drink. This is something you can drink every day. You know it is seriously good from seriously old dirt, and also it's a really approachable, really enjoyable red blend.
Well, I think you nailed it on the head. I mean, a second wine is just that. It's a classic concept that's been many generations in the making. I think it lends itself more to the occasion than it does to necessarily the style of wine. I mean, this wine doesn't get any new oak. It doesn't have our most concentrated fruit. It has our younger fruit. And it really is designed, for a Wednesday night, exactly like tonight, where you can actually have a wine that you don't need to ponder too much and don't need to pontificate over your usage. And as I mentioned, the top of our range does tend to be produced in a different style and lends itself to more of the investment and collectors community, people that are holding wine for much longer and seeing the benefit of it. But as you say, I use the word yummy all the time because I think it's one of the greatest compliments you can pay to a wine is just to say, man, that's yummy.
And it certainly is. There might be a couple of people thinking, well, it is yummy. What exactly is it? What do we find in this seriously old dirt other than yumminess?
Well, I mean, Dan, you've been in the wine game for some time. You would have noticed immediately just from a quick glance that it's a red wine, straight away from the color. But this is a Bordeaux style blend. The blend isn't something that we advertise on the label because we're blending to a style pretty much every year. But this particular vintage has a whack of Merlot, some Cabernet, some Malbec. So it's a 3-way Bordeaux blend. On occasion, the blend may lend itself to a few percent of Cabernet Franc, but the percentage does change. We're looking for a round, juicy, voluptuous wine that wraps itself around your mouth, leaves a lasting impression, and hopefully for those of you that have got it in your glass, that's what you're getting.
Speaking of round, juicy and voluptuous, I know Kathy Skipmarker is with us as our host this evening. If Kathy or anybody else does have a question, feel free to drop one through in the chat box. Mike, if I can ask you to put your Stellenbosch Wine Roots hat on and looking at the current state of play with South African wine, the present is not looking too rosy. Do we have cause for measured optimism going forward?
Just before I answer, I might point out that Ken Forrester is a former chairman of Stellenbosch Wine Roots. So, I need to tiptoe around because Ken left some big footprints to fill. In terms of the state of Stellenbosch wine, Stellenbosch is not broken. We've been through some tough times before. The times at the moment are pretty tough. But every single day, the winemakers are in the cellar. They are making wine. They are crafting their art. The current crisis is going to have no impact on Stellenbosch quality. On top of that, we're all working on a 2020 vintage, which by many accounts is really fantastic in quality, and also some excellent volume. So I think it's important to say that while we are unable to sell wine, the quality of future vintages is looking particularly rosy. The elephant in the room, though, is that we are prohibited from selling wine domestically, but exports are allowed. And to the extent that global export markets are even placing orders, which also is limited, restaurants are closed around the world. It is a tough time, but Stellenbosch is strong. It has endured, it will endure. And, we're looking forward to getting to the other end of the current crisis.
And that cannot come soon enough. Mike, thank you. I'm going to wrap up with you with a question that I'd like to ask all four of our wine superstar guests. So you get it straight up. The others have got a little more time to think about it. We've got some friends of South Africa, some great supporters of South Africa, some fellow countrymen who are with us in Dubai at the moment. In terms of supporting South Africa, we'd love them all to be drinking, celebrating, enjoying South African wine. If I can ask you for a recommendation of something else away from Villafonte, if our guests head out and head down to MMI or get down to one of their outlets, they'll sell them some South African wine, either a style of wine or a particular brand or estate that somebody should look out for to add to their understanding and appreciation of South African wine.
Oh, that's easy. I think there's been enough evangelical conversation tonight about Chenin. And by the way, I drink a lot of Chenin. I'm a huge fan. And so I'll go in a different direction. I'm going to use two words: Stellenbosch Cabernet. Cabernet Sauvignon is something that has really been making its mark in the Stellenbosch region for many decades. It's the quality is going through the roof. And if you can find those two words on a bottle, almost certainly you're going to find something with some high quality on it. And I might just say, going back to your question about is everything rosy in Stellenbosch? If we do have any excess stock coming out of the current coronavirus pandemic, we are relying on the British Lions tour of South Africa in July next year to mop up any kind of excess. So everything is looking particularly rosy.
We'll certainly look forward to that. I suspect there might be a few Dubai visitors making their way south to join us on that tour. Mike, thank you. Stellenbosch Cabernet Sauvignon has my thundering endorsement. In fact, if you'd like one in particular, look out for the 2015 2 Centuries from Nederburg. Neil's done something very, very special there. I see Joe Morgan says, no problem, we will be there. Joe, I'll send through phone numbers for Mike, for Ken, for Neil, and for Nadia. If you and your family would like to stay with them, absolutely fine. Bring all your friends. No problem there whatsoever. Nadia, let's go back to you, and I'll fire off the same question I did to the overlord of Stellenbosch. A style of wine, a brand of wine, an estate other than Waterkloof or False Bay, something for people to go and look for, to explore, that they might get a delightful surprise from.
Well, I would definitely say stick to the Helderberg region, which is a sub-region of Stellenbosch. And then we are imported by the same company, which is MMI in Dubai. So I would actually make Mr. Forrester smile and say the Petit Chenin, because I keep on seeing it everywhere I go in Dubai. So, and I've been pushed and forced to drink it, and I actually thoroughly enjoyed it. So I would support the fellow Helderberg region and say drink Petit Chenin.
Oh, good for you, Nadia. Supporting your region and supporting pensioners, which is a very, very admirable double show.
Someone's got to, eh?
That was just a little bit sucky-uppy, Nadia. Just a little bit on the sucky-uppy side.
Ken, I'm waiting for my case of that FMC. I'm just saying.
Nadia, you get more flies with honey than vinegar. Trust me.
All right. Before we wrap up with the smiling elderly statesman of Chenin Blanc, let's go back to Neil. Neil, again, the same question. Something for South Africans in Dubai to look out for that won't just support our industry, but give them great reward for what they find.
Yeah, I think it's always a surprise that each vintage is obviously different, but we're busy with quite a few exciting products and projects So the specific Anchorman that you guys were tasting tonight has now been registered also as old vine. So yeah, we're now moving towards the old vine territory as well. In my past, we've done quite a bit of work on old vines with previous producers, but I'm really excited to see how the Anchorman actually develops, and the style will also change, because you now really want to see the fruit start showing more specifically on the old vine that you can hang your hat on. So when it comes to region, so I've played in all the regions in the coastal belt, not really anywhere else, but it's for me all about terroir and let the soil speak, and having the right variety in the right areas, and depending on what you want, you can plant Chenin in the Cape Town region, or in the Philadelphia region, or in Darling. Stellenbosch also brings a unique attribute, and I invite everybody to come over. I mean, we're also being distributed by MMI, but come, and once you can all travel, I think the best way to experience South Africa is to actually come here to see the friendliness, to see our great food, the great environment where we live in, and just come and enjoy it with us. Please share our details. After today, you all friends of South African winemakers, and 4 more winemakers to tap into, and just to broaden your knowledge. So always willing to share, and thank you very much. It was a great evening.
And if you do get down to South Africa, as I hope you will, either as a visitor or returning home or coming to watch some rugby, the revamp at Nederburg in the Manor House, it's a spectacular, spectacular place to visit. And the wine's not too bad either, so well worth the combination. Right, let's finish with the man who earns his money in December by working as a department store Father Christmas, and does so miraculously well. Ken Forrester, you know so much of South African wine. You're such a champion of South African wine. You've already had your own wine endorsed by Nadia, who's desperately hoping for a discount on her next case. Give us something outside of the realm of Ken Forrester for our friends in Dubai to go and find another different estate, another different wine, something that might take them by surprise and go, whoa, South Africa is pretty special.
Well, Dan, having Mike nailed Cabernet for Stellenbosch, which is exactly what I was going to talk about, I have no option but to cast the net far and wide, further than you can cast a trout fly. I'm going all the way to Graham Beck bubbly. I think anything from Graham Beck, from Peter Ferreira, in a bubbly bottle, that is some of the best sparkling wine in the world. And it's an amazing buy. It's really inexpensive for what you're getting. It'll stand up next to some of the greatest Method Champenoise in the world. And I think Peter Ferreira can take a bow for really putting South Africa on the map as a sparkling wine producer. So that's where I would be going.
That is both an accurate and a worthy endorsement of Mr. Bubbles Ferreira, the man who produced the sparkling wine for Barack Obama's first day in office, his inauguration dinner, amongst other occasions. So that's a really good one to have, and I know he'll be very happy to hear that, Ken. Guys, thank you to all of you. Before we do wrap up and let Nadia, Niël, and Mike get back to their evenings, and let Ken get off to his bridge club, just a final opportunity for any questions. I do see Jo has said a classic. I'm not sure if she's referring to Peter Ferreira's Bubbles or to Ken, but they're both applicable. And thanks there from Kathy, who's going to look out for the Anchorman and Seriously Old Dirt, and rightly so. Do drop a comment if you have any. Otherwise, Kathy, if I can hand back to you. And before I do that, just a big thank you on my behalf. All of our winemakers have taken their time out to spend an hour or so with us. They're all good friends of mine, good friends of the industry, and it's been very special to have all 4 of you with us tonight. So thank you all for enlightening us and sharing some fabulous South African wine. And from Dan Really Likes Wine Headquarters, which is my converted garage, now cellar, here in Johannesburg, I'll say thank you very, very much indeed. Please keep supporting South Africa. I will leave you with my final thought on the wine industry, which is South Africa has 2 flags that I feel consistently fly so highly around the world. One is sport. I'm in my Bafana jersey. That's not always the highest flying flag, but whether it's our Springboks, our cricketers, our golfers, our swimmers, our runners, sport does really well for South Africa. But the other space so consistently is wine, and we make extraordinary wine. We're not just as good as the rest of the world. We're in most cases better. I'm so proud of the industry, and thank you in advance for helping to support great wine and great people. So Kathy, I'll hand over to you to say goodnight, but from Dan Really Likes Wine to our winemakers, to our guests, a really big thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much to everybody, to Mike, Niël, Nadia, and of course, Ken. Really, really do appreciate the time. I promise you, I've got a house full of guests here from every different nationality, and I'm punting South African wines here big time, okay? And everybody loves them, okay? They will be going to buy them, and we will be posting this on all social media channels tomorrow as well, so that we can promote it through various channels as well. And then the other thing is, everybody says they're all coming to stay with you as soon as the airports are open. So get ready. Dan, thank you very much. As always, lovely to see you. Really, really nice to get a bit of a touch of home. As you know, I miss home a lot. So it's really nice to hear everybody's opinions and their wine stories and things like that. But thank you very much. We really do appreciate it. And we are flying the flag here in Dubai. So good night. Thanks,
Thank you, Kathy. Good night, everybody. Have a great evening.
Yes.
Take care.
Dan.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye, Claire.